There's three parts to a relationship. There's partner one, partner two, and the relationship. Partner one or partner two isn't doing their own growth. There's a quote from Nietzsche: a long-term relationship, a marriage, is the longest conversation you will ever have. And if you're not, as individuals, growing within yourself, you're going to run out of things to say to one another. If you want to keep the relationship interesting, both partners need to continue their paths of individual growth so that when they come together, hey, this is what I did. This is my growth edge. This is what I learned today. And there's something interesting to talk about. If you're getting divorced or separated, you're not going to be with that person anymore. That person is off the table. We're not responsible for other people. What did you do that allowed this relationship to go the way that it went? Well, pay attention only to your responsibility, to whatever those red flags were that were avoided. Whose responsibility it was? The person who avoided it.
Welcome everyone to Soul Communication. I'm excited today to continue diving deeper into the topics of consciousness. And today we'll talk about divine masculine energy. We've talked a lot about divine feminine and awakening of the divine feminine energy on Earth. I have a very fascinating guest. His name is Michael Tiano. He's a transformative guide, a founder of Men of Integrity Retreats, where he leads men through expanded states of consciousness to access deeper healing, purpose, and connection. Michael is also working with Plant Medicine Center in Peru, and he is known for his integrity and detailed approach to integration. Welcome, Michael, to my show.
Thank you for having me for this conversation.
I think it's much needed conversation. But before we jump in, what excites you today? You've been on this journey for a while, working with various people, using different tools. And as you see consciousness expanding, what excites you on your journey?
I am most excited when I work with people one-on-one or in the retreats. That space of vulnerability and growth and transformation is so nourishing to me, and it feels like I'm adding some value to the world, and watching people go through their own journeys and having these amazing awarenesses about things that maybe don't serve them, or things that were outside of awareness in the past and are now inside of awareness that they cannot ignore anymore, that they need to work through, pass through, process. And watching and being part of those journeys in particular are really what brings me so much joy and purpose. It's my favorite space to be, is in that medicine space with folks.
That's so
Just
beautiful.
what lights me up.
Yeah, I am very familiar with that space. It's very sacred container, and it's just so nice to disconnect people from the noise, right? And bring them into the sacred space of who they are, to allow them to really remember the truth behind all these different layers and projections. You and I started talking before we jumped on a podcast about the energies of divine feminine versus divine masculine. For those who may be new to understanding of these energies, what does that mean? And then why perhaps these journeys in the female collective are different than the ones on the male collective?
So the way I describe it is I describe it through a couple of examples. So the best way that I think makes the most sense is to think of a rocket ship. A rocket ship has two components, right? A rocket ship's complicated, right? It's got all these buttons and engines and all these things. But if you think about two main components, you have the rocket ship itself, and then you have the fuel for the rocket ship. And both parts are useless without the other. So if you just have a fuel depot, you set a match to it, and the fuel is energy. And then what I think about energy in terms of part of creation is the feminine. So if you just have a feminine, this fuel depot, and you set light to it, boom, you just get this chaotic explosion. And if you just have the rocket ship, which is my analogy for the masculine, and there's no energy, there's no fuel, and it just is going to sit there on the launch pad in perfect stillness. It's not doing anything, can't do anything. It's incapable of doing anything. But when you put the energy, the divine feminine, and add it to the divine masculine, the rocket ship and the fuel, then all of a sudden you could go out to the moon, you could do whatever you want, navigate the earth, whatever is needed. So that's one analogy that I used to say. Everything has divine masculine and divine feminine in it. If you don't have one, you have nothing. The other story I really like that paints some picture for me is the divine dance between Shiva and Shakti. Shiva is the masculine, right? And he's represented oftentimes, most of the time, sitting in perfect stillness with on a lotus flower in a perfectly still lake. Nothing is happening. Shakti, on the other hand, right? Dancing, moving around, all this movement, beautiful, like expressiveness, and with her like different manifestations, Kali, the chaos, and all. But together, through their divine union, the masculine and the feminine, you have the creation of all that is. Right? So that's the way I like to think about the divine aspects of it. And then why it's important is to recognize that whether we be male or female, we both have these capacities. Everything has these capacities. I like to think about them more as archetypes, patterns of excitation in the universal field, that rather than energies that are distinct, because there's no separate. Once you start making things distinct, it starts becoming complicated, dualistic, and whatnot. So they're just different patterns, archetypes, which things kind of align with. And so when we are out of alignment with one or other of these archetypes, it brings us into a disharmonious state of being. So whether we be a man or a woman or an animal or whatever, I don't know that animals can actually choose to do these things, but when we retract away, and this is we're going to talk about like a man retracting away from the part of him that is divinely feminine. When we retract away from that part and we ignore those parts that are our intuition, our capacity for caring, our healing nature, our gentleness, all that sort of those characteristics that are more associated with the feminine, right? And we tracked away from that. What we're left with is the opposite of those characteristics. So instead of being intuitive, we are authoritarian. Instead of being healing, we are cruel. Instead of being gentle, we are violent. And then we label that as toxic masculine. But I'm here to tell you that toxic masculine doesn't have anything to do with masculinity. It has to do with retracting away from our internal nature, our internal feminine part of our nature. And the same thing with the masculine part. Those capacities that we associate with the masculine, that the logic, rigorous logic, the capacity for going out into the world and having capacity for doing in spite of danger, right? If one retracts away from those capacities, from their masculine nature, like if you tell a little girl, that's not very ladylike when she's trying to go out and do the world, play sports or whatever, and we're telling her not to do those things that we associate with the masculine, what is she left with when she retracts away from that? She retracts into another vibrational pattern, which is called the wounded feminine. So this was labeled as hysteria in the early part of the last century. Unarticulated sense of self, can't do for herself, doesn't feel that she has ownership in the world, that she can't go out and express herself in the way. So she's unable to be and perform work in the world. So that's how I look at it. And I think it's important because in the West, as of late, we've labeled anything that's masculine as having something to do with toxicity. Oh, he's too masculine, therefore he's toxic. And I'm here to say that's not the case at all. When someone is toxic, it's because they're not connected with that archetype inside themselves that is associated with the divine feminine. So that's how I look at it. I don't know what you think.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And I think for me, it's also the energies that within the body, because I work specifically with the Kundalini energy, the Shakti energy that you were discussing. I see that there's the right side of the body, the left side of the body, and how these energies go through our chakras. And we all have that. It's actually, when you're talking about wounding, it's interesting to see like where it's also expressing itself on the body.
Oh,
So
absolutely.
sometimes people have issues with their right knee or their right hip. What is the body trying to tell you? What's this particular body symptom? Maybe you're moving too
Mm-hmm.
fast through the world. This is where the masculine maybe is over dominant and you need to slow down and you need to be a little more balanced with your other side and more in receiving. That's exactly what happened to me. I moved to New York and I was running and running until my body was like, nope. And I got sciatica in
Much.
the right leg. And I had to sit with that and learn through that through my body. It's like turtle medicine. Where am I not balanced? And I realized actually that the masculine was over dominating and was overheating the inside. And
Mm-hmm.
so that was my own journey. So I definitely can relate to what you're saying.
Yeah. So what we do in the retreats and what I work with men is to embody both. So we
Mhm.
don't elevate one over the other, but we connect with both of these archetypes, these patterns of being. And I think it's important because in our society over the past however long, we haven't honored that feminine aspect, that divinely feminine aspect. We don't pay for it. It's not honored. And we tell people, go to New York and just do. Hey, hold on a second. It's too much for everybody, whether it be man or woman. We need to be closer to our essential nature, which is balance, like you said.
So, men's work, maybe give us an example of where someone who comes to your retreat can experience both of these energies and how, in the way that facilitates that process.
Yeah, there is. We don't do a lot of raw, but we talk about doing in the world. So we don't do so much in the retreat. What we do in our retreats is we're unpacking ourselves and putting all these things out to be observed, understood, witnessed, witnessed by self and witnessed by the other members of the retreat, the facilitators and the guides. And also what we do is we use the word safe space, but we make a space where it is safe to express yourself, right? To express yourself in a vulnerable nature. Talk about those things that aren't going so well in your life and then maybe understand how ingrained patterns of core beliefs, identify those and bring those into the light so that we can see how they're operating in anyone's life. So bring these things to the light and then see how they are manifesting. And lots of times, because men haven't been given the space to express themselves, which is a feminine kind of thing, expression, right? They haven't even been able to express it to themselves. And so they got it all stuffed in there. And so we don't talk a lot about masculine and feminine different energies differently in the retreat. We don't label all that kind of stuff except
Right.
for a presentation on relationships that we do a workshop on there where we identify these as different things and how they work and interplay together. But by giving the space and the honor for men to actually express their softer natures, their tender spots, and by modeling that, by the facilitators and the guides model that themselves, because we don't put ourselves as guides and facilitators, we don't put ourselves above that, because in every retreat, everybody's, whether you're a guide, facilitator, or participant, you are going through something in that moment. And so as a group, as a collective, we witness each other and share each other and support each other to go through all parts of being without separating masculine or feminine. And then there's a lot of goofing around and having fun as well. And a little bit around in the morning, a little physical activity, some Wim Hof, things that kind of activate that masculine capacity that I think is important for men to embody and to be part of. But we really try and honor both throughout the entire retreat without trying to separate or make distinctions of them. What we want to do is bring people to a place where they feel heard, understood, and not judged. Because that's a lot of the judgment is something where a lot of people end up deciding to stuff things down because of fear of judgment. And one of the things that they'll notice when they come on to the retreat immediately is they feel comfortable and they recognize, wow, this is a place where I'm not going to be judged for these things that I've been thinking or holding down maybe my whole life since I was a child. And through the medicine work and whatnot, obviously bubbles up to the top. And then we have a place to actually discuss and work through those things with various activities and places to honor the suffering and honor the growth. That's really what's important about it.
I think the men definitely need that kind of space for expressing their feelings. And I am noticing a lot of men are very much in their mind, and sometimes
Mm-hmm.
they have harder time to open their hearts, or they have heart walls. And the female, it might be another way around. Yeah, how do we help man to be more embodied and opening the heart and not so much in the mind and in the control and the ego?
Yeah, it has to start by examples. We have to make it okay for men to express themselves. We only give Bill Burr is a comedian. He talks about this, and I think it's really wise. He says we give men only the opportunities to express anger, and I'm okay. But really, the emotional landscape is this huge landscape of all these different, not even just the four primaries of fear, joy, sadness, and anger, but all the different colors amongst all those main primary emotions. There's all the frustration, there's sadness, there's anguish, there's bliss, there's joy. The palette of emotions is huge. And when we restrict guys to being like, you're okay or you're angry, and they're growing up in an environment where they're okay. How are you doing? I could be really happy, but when you ask me how am I doing, I'm okay. I can't express my joy. Or are you feeling I'm sad and I don't know how to be sad, so therefore I'm just irritable and angry because that's the only thing I've been given permission for. So a lot of this stuff has to do with opening up the vocabulary and the connection in the body with how all these different emotions sit and lay in there, identifying them, and then seeing what's going on in their life, in the external environment that's actually causing the emotion to present itself, right? Because the emotions and how I think about them, they are there as early warning indicators as to something that's going on externally or trigger something internally from the past. And it's telling you something about the environment. It's not there for nothing. It's there for a reason. And so when you can really identify on this entire landscape of the emotional landscape, what am I feeling right now? And really put a label to it. And then what is going on that's leading to this feeling? Because the feeling comes first, and then we give it a cognitive label. I'm feeling sad because something happened. So, but by not allowing the entire emotional landscape to present itself and to be labeled and identified so that we know what's going on, where we feel it in our bodies, then we can't use that information because it's hidden from us. So one of a lot of stuff we do is, what are you feeling? And slowing down. So where do you feel in your body? Kind of thing. Okay, and what's going on? That's what's going on with you that's having this thing arise. And oftentimes when you make that connection of the emotion to what's going on, the emotion will just evaporates, because the emotion's like, oh, I was there to tell you something. You heard it. You heard the message. Now I don't need to be there anymore. Now you can go out and do something with this information that you have, because the emotions are, for me, primarily to process, but also to tell you about what's going on in the environment and yourself. So we work a lot on those sorts of activities in real time, because it's a real in time experience. It's not like things happen. There's an activity in a very relatively strict what we're doing, but at any moment, if something comes up for somebody, we give them the space to work through that and help them work through it if they don't have experience doing that sort of connection with themselves and with their emotional experience.
I know, because you're working with the plant medicine, sometimes it does bring up these childhood woundings or ancestral woundings or serious traumas.
Mm-hmm.
How do you help someone to integrate these traumas? Because sometimes this earthquakes that goes through the landscape and then just totally breaks the person apart. Because sometimes the plant medicine work is so powerful and takes months to integrate back. And I have a client, for instance, now that I'm trying to help to integrate, and he's having a really hard time with the trauma that came up. How would you
Mm-hmm.
help someone like that?
So I think the most important thing is it's easy to say, but it's harder to do, is to allow them, is to make sure that they don't feel judged, that there's no judgment in the air, because oftentimes that trauma has been tamped down, has not been expressed or even known about because of the shame or the guilt or whatever that's connected to that trauma. That's why it's been uncovered, why it's been buried. And so when you're speaking to this person, is to really let them know it's okay, that whatever it is that happened to them, and that as a guide or facilitator or other participant, there's no judgment here. This happened. It happened. Right. So how does this trauma then now, what did that trauma teach you about how to be in the world? Because oftentimes these traumas will lead to some belief, they can be small or they can be large. I can't be safe in the world. I'm never safe. It's a trauma that I've seen a lot of times. I'm always people that have a lot of fear in there. And then they go back to these early memories that they might not have had access to. Say, oh, I remember I was left alone in my house with somebody that was a known predator. Nothing happened, but I knew that something was fishy because of the way mom and dad were acting about it. And so now I need to be always on the lookout for danger in the world. And so I live my entire life on the lookout for danger in the world, but I've stuffed down that core memory. And so now I have this core belief. So making that connection with, okay, how is this trauma? How did that land you into having a belief about how the world works? Because we're always trying to make sense of the world. And then, is this belief true? How would the world look like? How would your behavior be? How would you react differently or respond differently rather than reacting if you now believed something different from that original core belief that has been operating as your wheel of decision-making processes? How would you act differently? So, oh, I could be this, I could be that. Yes, you can. You can do that. So you want to try to want to try that next time something comes up where you feel that now that you've identified the belief, you know that it's running in the background like a virus in a computer, right? It's operating there. Next time you have that feeling, oh, should I be scared in this moment? To just use the example we were just using. Oh, am I safe right now? I am safe right now. And then over time, by integrating, that belief can now leave. It's done its purpose. It protected you as a child, no longer needs to be there. So that's one of the ways. How you do it, a million ways to do it. But I think primarily is to like work with the person very tenderly, very gingerly, and very poignantly to identify where that trauma connected to their belief and how it's operating in the world with a zero judgment and say, okay, we know that this relationship exists between this trauma and this belief and how you're operating in the world. Let's try little steps. Identify ways, 5 ways that I was safe today, where I felt safe. Oh, okay. And that becomes more and more. That would just be one example. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, thank you. That was very helpful. So I feel like everyone can integrate. It's just a matter of maybe it takes time. Some people integrate faster than others. It's important for everyone to do the work. And even though I know a lot of people are afraid of doing plant medicine, it doesn't have to be plant medicine. Wouldn't you agree, Michael? There's many ways to get to the core of who we are. Just plant medicine is one way.
Of course, any way that any activity, like even meditation or stuff, things pop up, and then going into that feeling, going into that expression, going into that part of self that has been uncovered. Anything that allows you to do that is going to give you some juice to squeeze. It's all about what you do with the information you get from the body, from the heart, from the mind, even. So that's the most important part. And we have so many. If I ask you to remember something, how much can you remember from when you were 6? Not very much. But you had a whole experience while you were 6, moment by moment happening, all these things. And some of those things we've forgotten about, we've obscured them, and they're still operating because that 6-year-old child, 8-year-old child, 10-year-old child, they're all still part of us. They're all still in there. It's all part of the memory banks. It's all part of you. It all remains in the fabric of all of creation. So when we can access those things and make sense of them, then we're integrating, then we're growing, so that they don't. Those are the shackles that shackle us to behaving in ways and being in ways and medicating ways and doing behaviors that we don't want to do, to try and escape the sort of experiences that have colored how we are in the world. And so anything you can do that helps that doesn't numb you and take away from self-awareness, because all these things that are operating outside of awareness are just things that we can't change them, modify them, or act with them unless they're brought to the light of awareness. So whatever you have to do, whatever you want to do, whatever you feel comfortable of doing, whether it be therapy, meditation, working with a coach, all these kinds of things, different modalities, they all should be leading, if they're effective, to the same sort of outcome, which is, how can I live without the shackles of ego, live without the shackles of core beliefs, live without fear, right? Because fear is like, so many people are just living in fear. Everything is a fear-based thing. So how can I just live with more ease in the world? When we remove these things, bring them to the light, see how they're working in our lives, and see how we're affected by and how our behavior is actually impacted by these unacknowledged parts of self that are in there anyway, then we can actually be more at ease, be more at peace, be more in the present moment, less worried about the future, less worried about the past, less regretful about the past.
Yeah. And I
So
think like the present moment and
yeah,
being
but getting to the present is tough
is that.
because we're trapped by our past and worried about our future.
Yeah, exactly. The past is the depression because we were worried about living
And
through the
anxiety is the
past, and
future.
then anxiety is the future. So people are either anxious or depressed. The more we learn how to embody the present moment and be, like you were saying, Shiva, in the Zen moment of the now, then it's that's a true divine masculine. So
Mhm.
in that context, yeah, I'm interested to talk about relationships as well, of how these energies of divine masculine, divine feminine then interact, because we have that within ourselves, and how they interact with our partners, because obviously our partners are
Mhm.
mirrors to us to reflect back
Absolutely.
those energies.
So the way I like to explain it is that, so the men that come to our retreats are, I don't want to say conventionally masculine, but they're men that identify as primarily masculine, right? They acknowledge that they have feminine aspect as well, and they want to be in a relationship or are in a relationship with a woman who is primarily feminine. That's the group that we're working with right now. We're working to expand our offerings first to women, basically outside, and then to other groups as well. But the groups that we started working with are the groups that we're most familiar with. So start with what you know. So to use very crass, very gross meaning not refined language or not refined numbers, imagine that your average male that comes to our retreat is like embodied as, let's say, 70% masculine energy, 30% feminine. And that's their like base level. Mm. And they're in a relationship with a partner that is maybe 70% feminine, 30% masculine. And the differences between men and women are not for naught. They are, back in the day when we had to live in villages and in small communities and go hunt our food and all this stuff, you're much better off in any environment having specialists. Everybody has a job that they're good at, rather than having everybody kind of being mediocre at everything. So the masculine is primarily involved with going out and doing, right?
Hunting and men and gathering food.
Hunting, taking care of the village, going out there and taking care of this kind of like individual stuff, right? Individual task oriented, like one task, right? You're going to hunt the elk or the deer or the boar or whatever. If your mind is on all these different things and you're multitasking, worrying about what's happening back at home and all this kind of stuff, you're not going to get the shot. You're not going to throw the spear because you're distracted. So men in general, your average man, not all men, not all biological men, but on average men, and this is well known, men are more individual focused, meaning like they're like laser focused and more task oriented. Women, on the other hand, just imagine stereotypically back at the village, 5 kids, different ages, running all over the place. There's a spider here, there's a snake there, there's a river there. They're open, and this is borne out in research. Women are much better at multitasking than men. Men are not very good at multitasking. Distracted, they screw up what they were supposed to be doing because they have to do 3 tasks at once. Women are much better than men at multitasking. Why? Because they are specialists at this, right? Taking care of many things at once, simultaneous, right? And also more relational. So if you think about having to take care of kids, and it takes a village, right? If you are a woman and you are not a very nice person and you get sick and your kids need help, you might not get the help you need. So relations and how appearances and how I'm relating to this person and that person have a much more impact and have much more importance to your average, to the feminine nature than to the masculine nature. And as such, our needs as men and women are also different in relationship. So women's primary need, because they're taking care of all this stuff, is to feel trusting and safe, to the extent that a man can help his woman really feel safe. And I don't mean just safe like that she has a car and all that kind of stuff, but really feel safe to express herself fully, emotionally, spiritually, what's going on, and that she doesn't have a fear that she's too much or not enough for her partner. She really truly feels embodied safe, like I am safe with this person. He's looking out for me and it's taking me into primary consideration. That is like meeting the needs of the woman, of the feminine. In the masculine, what they want to do is to provide, and to the feeling that we get as men that makes us feel most valued in relationship is when we feel useful and actually needed. When we feel dismissed, that we don't add value to the relationship, that's where our kind of being drops. So women want trust and safety, and men useful and needed. And then it can go on from there. Something that I help guys realize, another reason why just safety is so paramountly important for women, is the fact that your average woman is 30 to 50% less strong, less physically capable of violence than 50% of the population. As an example, I use a photo that I have of Joe Rogan. Right?
Of course.
He's a powerful guy, but he's standing and talking and looking up to this other guy named Brock Lesnar, who was a heavyweight UFC champion who weighed at that time about 300 pounds, and Joe Rogan was about 220. The size differential between Joe and Brock is about the same differential between your average man and your average woman. Imagine that the whole world that you're walking around is all Brock Lesnar's, right? Or imagine that Brock Lesnar was sitting on the sofa next to you and he just raises his voice to you, right? He weighs 300 pounds and it's not a fat 300 pounds, it's all muscle. He's also like NCAA wrestling, a national champion, UFC heavyweight champion. Like this guy is not to be trifled with. And so he just raises his voice, which is a sign of dominance and threat. How are you going to feel in that moment? And everybody's, oh, whoa. And so be careful with your tone, with your beingness, because you don't feel unsafe in the world because you're in the 50% of the population that is stronger physically and able to like deal with a violent act more than the other. So be careful with your tone of voice, with your words. Be calm, right? Violence is something that's very important for a man to be able to use, but judiciously to protect, not to threaten. So it's one of the things we talk about is to imprint on these guys the importance of physical safety, emotional safety for their partners. In bed, like is consent there? Do you take care of her in bed? Are you taking her into primary consideration? Is this a partnership in all parts? And yeah, because guys will do stupid things. Like a client of mine was telling me that her boyfriend, they were out in a dark parking lot. He says, they had taken two separate cars. And he was, I don't need to walk you to the car. Because for him, it wasn't a big deal. And he was looking through the world through his eyes. Well, yeah, I'm perfectly safe and you'll be safe too. But to her, she didn't feel safe. And if he could just take that extra step and let me just walk you to the car so make sure you're okay. That's a huge deal. So it's not a big deal, but recognizing that we see the world through different apparatuses, different being, a being who if someone comes and attacks me, I'm going to be able to like defend myself more than my partner is going to be able to. She's only 120 pounds. I'm 220 pounds. It's just not making that extra step to pay attention to what her needs are so that she can feel safe is going to make her feel really good in the relationship. She feels that, okay, this guy's got me, and vice versa. If she asks me to do something and I do it well and I get recognition for that, it makes me feel super, super good because I want her to be happy. I want her to be pleased with me. And not in that fearful sense that you guys can get into, because I think that's after the fact when resentment and contempt starts seeping into relationships. That happens after a long time. Guys do a really good job at the beginning of the relationship. They start screwing up as the relationship seems to go down a little bit in terms of the excitement of it.
That's an interesting one because it feels like we were just talking about hunting. There's like a hunting aspect that they get like the adrenaline, they get excited about catching their prey. In some ways, like the beginning of the relationship, there's that excitement of the hunting game, and then they get complacent as they get into the relationship. And it can be on both parts. A lot of marriages don't sustain. We've seen this codependent model where there's more divorces than we can count. Yeah, so that's something that made me think a lot about the codependent model versus independent model. So what you're referring to, it's a model where both make each other kind of complementary, but I also believe each one has to do their work and really find that safety within themselves, find their love within themselves, find that wholeness within themselves, and then they come together from that whole place. And then that's the true divine union in the sense of the relationship where you first found the union within yourself and then you come together to consciously grow together.
What you just said is very important because people think of the relationship as the only thing, but there's three parts to a relationship. There's partner one, partner two, and the relationship. Partner one or partner two isn't doing their own growth. There's a quote from Nietzsche that I don't remember exactly, but the gist is this: a long-term relationship, a marriage, is the longest conversation you will ever have, right? The longest conversation. And if you're not, as individuals, growing, right, growing within yourself, you're going to run out of things to say to one another. If you want to keep the relationship interesting, both partners need to continue their paths of individual growth so that when they come together, hey, this is what I did. This is my growth edge. This is what I learned today. And there's something interesting to talk about. I'm sure you've seen this. Everybody's seen the old couple at the coffee shop who are not who are eating, and they've run out of stuff to say many years ago, either because they were scared that if one grows and the other ones they're going to grow apart. That's not the case. You grow together, but you also have to grow individually. Just that, exactly what you said. Because otherwise, you're going to. It sounds kind of silly. You're going to run out of things to say. You're not going to be interesting. There's not going to be anything new in the world to talk about what's going on in you today, what's going on in the other person today. You'll run out of stuff. You'll be the old couple that has stayed together for 60 years just out of convenience or for the kids or because social expectation says you couldn't get broken up. And neither of them grew, maybe because the other one didn't want to allow the other one to grow or vice versa, or somebody didn't feel that they had permission to grow or whatever those things are. They run out of things to say. When we as individual partners in each relationship can continue to grow individually, just as you were saying, then the conversation is always alive. There are lovers with new eyes every day. The relationship doesn't get old. It's super exciting. Super exciting. Every day is exciting. And I'm blessed to be in a relationship like that now, where we're both doing our work, growing, taking new activities, learning things about ourselves, and coming back and telling you, what did I learn about myself today? This is what I learned. This is what I did. It's exciting. And then getting feedback and talking about that. And every day we talk for at least an hour about what's going on and what we're doing. We haven't run out of things to say. I don't think we ever will. And that's my hope for everyone.
And I can resonate. I'm the same type of marriage union for almost a decade now, and we've grown so much together, and it's been beautiful. We call them mirrors, like vibration mirrors, where we just reflect back constantly, and it's been a beautiful journey. And I can't even imagine where I would have been if I didn't have this journey. So I think sometimes we have to go through relationships that don't work out to understand what we really want. And I definitely went through that as well to understand what type of relationship doesn't serve me, to come into the next, I guess, the energetics of it, like the magnetism versus the electricity is so electromagnetic. And I do feel the woman, she is the magnet. She's the womb. She's holding that container as well. And so it does work together really nicely when it's in pure balance and conscious intention for, like you said, for each day. In shamanism, the way we got married was, shaman said, it was at Burning Man, it was a beautiful wedding. It was like, Diana, you stand on your mountain. Daniel, you stand on your mountain. You're visiting each other, but you don't go into each other's swamps. And the model for our relationship, it's like each morning is, yeah, it's like weaving a new contract, right? It's untying the knot, not tying the knot. So we're not here to suffocate each other, but actually each one is on their own very powerful places. And then it's just a co-creation. Yeah, it's a dance. It's a dance. And what I am observing, Michael, is that and maybe because I'm a female, so I'm curious to hear from you. I have a lot of girlfriends that are in the process of divorce right now. And then often they're the ones initiating it because they're doing the spiritual work and they came to a place where they in a certain frequency that is no longer matching their husbands that still live in the old paradigm or not wanting to do the work or understand they need to do the work. So there's that disconnect.
Yeah, and that's a good point. Two things that you made me think of when you were mentioning that about divorce and on a couple. So we have some guys that have been divorced, have been on a second relationship or whatnot. And what I tell them is the same thing I would tell your friends who are getting divorced, is when so often the typical pattern is when one gets divorced, right? Or one is separating, they immediately blame the other partner. They say, oh, if he wasn't or if she wasn't this way, blah, 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 blah. And what I recommend people do, if you're getting divorced or separated, you're not going to be with that person anymore. That person is off the table. What did you do? What, because we're also responsible for it. And other people aren't responsible for us. We're not responsible for other people. What did you do that allowed this relationship to go the way that it went? What was your response? Pay attention only to your responsibility to what happened. It could be early on, red flags that I ignored, blah, 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 blah. I saw this, he didn't treat me, he didn't do this for me, or he yelled at me at this thing when he was upset or he was drinking or whatever the heck, whatever those red flags were that were avoided, whose responsibility was? The person who avoided it. Make an inventory of your own responsibility to what didn't work in that relationship. so that when you go to the next opportunity, you say, oh, okay, I'm not going to ignore that red flag when it comes up. We'll either talk about it, or I'm just going to not waste my time here. Or I close off my heart when he needed me, for example, or I withdrew when she was emotional and I wasn't able to contain her. When she got upset, I just withdrew or went to drinking or whatever it was, or played my video games, whatever those things. What are the things that you did, right? That you are responsible for? Because as soon as you just put it on the other person, guess what? What happens all the time? They drop right into the next relationship, and the same damn pattern happens because and then they believe the same, the blame, oh, it's that person again, he's an asshole or she's a bitch or whatever they say. Is like, no, now the common denominator in both of these relationships is you. And you met the same person, same pattern has unraveled itself. That's self-awareness. That's paying attention to what your contribution was, whether it was early on, whether you shouldn't have been in the relationship in the first place, or later on where you didn't work on things in the time that it was the right time to work on them. So that's the thing I would tell your girlfriends, and that I tell the guys that are in divorce or looking for a new partnership. How can you do better? Where did you ignore a red flag? Super important. The other thing I wanted that you mentioned about your relationship, which I'm so happy for you, because it's amazing, huh? To be in a relationship like that, is that there's something that psychologists will tell you, oh yeah, the honeymoon period of a relationship is maximum 2 years, right? That's based on research. That's based on averages. And what we do in our culture is we take something that is common and we normalize it, right? Say, oh, this happens a lot, so this is normal. Not the truth. Just because something is common doesn't mean it's normal or it's healthy. It just means that it's common. That's it. A lot of people, it's like the obesity epidemic in the country. It is common. 60% of Americans are obese, right? But that's not normal, right? It's because of our food system. It's because of our lack of exercise. It's because of our lack of engagement with the world, right? But the tendency is to normalize it. Okay, now maybe it's okay to be a higher weight, or it's okay. Oh, if you're falling out of love in 2 years because the honeymoon period is over. And we normalize these things, that by normalizing them, we allow them to be normal. We call them normal, but it's not the healthy way of being that we want to be, so that we can be fully in our best lives. And the honeymoon period is another thing that I rail against. Is no, if you continue to grow, if you continue to be the best partner you can, you continue to work together in the ways that you were eloquently saying a little bit ago with your partner, then the honeymoon period doesn't have to end. You can be married to the same person for 60 years and still see them with new eyes every day. Still, who are you today? Like you said, not tying these knots, but untying the knots, like helping each other, and just be more and more in love. The honeymoon period, I love my partner more today than I did in the first 2 years. And I didn't think it would be possible, right? So what I'm experiencing, what I hear your experience, is not common. But I think that is what we need to normalize, is that is the relationship we all long for, right? So anyway, get off my soapbox.
Thank you for that. I agree with you. It's not normal, and I want it to be normal. I think divine union and this type of relationship is the right model. And I think when the collective, each person does the work and really reflects back, like you said, between relationships and catches patterns and realizes what's not serving them any longer, what behaviors that are not serving, what type of connections that are not serving them, then they get more clear about what does serve them. And so they have more chance to get into a relationship and work and continue working. It's an art. Relationships are art, but it's reflection of who we are and how we engage with the world and the work we're doing and improving ourselves. And partnership is a big piece of it. For me, partnerships have been catalysts in my awakening, and each person, they say some beings, some relation, they are for a reason, some for a season, and some for a lifetime. Recognizing what they are for. Sometimes they're meant to be short, but there's something that activates on a soul level for us, that spark or some sort of curiosity, whatever that is. And that's okay too. Like I liked how you said, learning the lessons, reflecting on the lessons, and then applying them to our daily life, and but without judgment, with full forgiveness and compassion. That maybe some relationships just run their course. Maybe some relationships are meant to be short or longer. And sometimes people grow apart, and some souls choose to evolve and some don't want to. They're just very comfortable where they are. So I think what's that term that's they're conscious uncoupling? So that happens.
Yeah,
That's a California one. Conscious uncoupling, right?
for sure.
But that's beautiful too. Like also knowing that maybe there's a place where separation can happen. So also I respect those who can consciously uncouple, whether it's divorce or whatever, where it's done in peace, integrity, to move on their journeys where they need to, versus that reflection of the inner self. If it's an internal war and then you're trying to control, and then the divorce is ugly, and all the things you hear out there, it's also a reflection of the work the person has done. So thank you so much. This has been such a beautiful, interesting conversation. And if
Enjoy.
there are any men out there or women interested in your retreats, how they can find you and work with you.
Yeah. So for the men's retreats, it's moi.community. So that's the URL is moi.community. And interestingly enough, with the one-on-ones, when I work one-on-one with people in my office in Northern California, it's about 75% women that I work with one-on-one, which is, it's harder to get guys they know this is going to be an emotional experience. It's harder to get guys to get through that threshold. For anybody who wants to work with me one-on-one, it's michaeltiernoguide.com. You can find out how to reach me there, contact links and all that kind of stuff, and a lot of information about my approach and how I see a lot of these things, some of the things that we've talked about today. And so, yeah, michaeltiernoguide.com and moi.community are the best ways to reach me.
Beautiful. And we'll include that in the show notes as well. And Michael, as we wrap up, any final words for the audience kind of on this topic, and advice for those who maybe seeking relationships or seeking a deeper relationship with themselves?
Sure. Well, I think you may have mentioned this before we started recording, but it is the message. It is the simplest, most basic message, but it seems like the hardest thing for people to do is that when they're engaging with somebody or engaging with life is to take it down a little bit in terms of speed, slow down a little bit, make room to really hear the other person deeply, not just nonviolent communication and doing the steps, but like really take the time that's needed to understand the other person. When you're doing something, when you're eating, really treasure that bite that, these animals and plants gave up their lives for us to really get nourished by them, to slow down. And you will actually get more done if you do things slowly than if you rush through things. Oftentimes when we rush through things with this a conversation, and we're rushing through the conversation, we didn't hear the person, and then we need to re-explain ourselves. We felt we lost the point, and all of a sudden what we want it to be a short conversation ends up being 3 conversations to get to the point, for example. Or you're trying to do a task, and because you're rushing through it, you do it poorly, and you have to redo it. So my best advice, like if it's just a general statement, is just try and do everything a little slower. Do it at 5 speed, just to make sure that you are able to do things maximally. You'll get more done. You'll enjoy life more. You'll be more present, and you'll be in a greater sense of joy because you'll be able to experience what's going on rather than rushing through it. As if there was somewhere to get to, right? We're all going somewhere, but we don't know where we're going. There's nowhere to get to. Just slow the F down. So that's what I would tell them.
Beautiful. Slow down. Be like a turtle. That's my favorite. Thank you so much, Michael. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. Thank you so much for listening to Soul Communication. I'm excited to share that my book, Mastering Quantum Creation, Awaken the Phoenix Within, Manifest Your Reality, and Reclaim Your Cosmic Power, is out on Amazon and the major platforms. It just hit bestseller early in September. If you haven't gotten your copy yet, you can get amazing images. The book covers everything from galactic history to Kundalini activation, source light link, much more on quantum. Please continue supporting this podcast. More episodes are coming, so like and subscribe and share with your friends.